Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I am here with John Perry from Stated Clearly, and we are going to be talking a little bit about the Bret Weinstein, Richard Dawkins debate discussion. I don't know what you want to call it. So, John, I'll give you a minute to introduce yourself, introduce your channel and whatnot.
Yeah, my name's John. I do Stated Clearly animations, which you may have seen. There's some on the evidence for evolution. There's one on the RNA world hypothesis. I do a lot of stuff on genetics, evolution, and the origin of life. I'm now starting to do a lot of stuff on chemistry. And I just work with different researchers and universities to simplify their science for the public. And then I also have a channel called Stated Casually, where I kind of will dig into more things that are a little bit more controversial. I did a tour of the Ark Encounter on there. And you know, I'm analyzing this debate between Bret Weinstein and Richard Dawkins, and so that's me. So Stated Clearly and Stated Casually.
So I've watched a number of your Stated Clearly videos. I have to admit, I'm a fan. I've been watching your videos for a long time. I think they're great. Cool. I think what you do is awesome. I share your passion for making complex ideas in science simple to give people. My ideas, I don't want to I want to simplify it to the point that it captures their interest and they want to learn more, because I want them to understand all the rich complexity of it. And I think it's beyond it's within anyone's grasp. It's just a matter of motivating them a bit. So I share your passion. I am a fan. So we had talked before this, and just to lay out exactly how we're going to do this, we're going to be watching a 20-minute clip of the video together. John had a live stream on Shannon Q's channel. Actually,
it was on Stated Casually.
Okay. I saw a link from Shannon Q. I follow her on Twitter. I tuned in. I'm very interested in this topic. We even had some back and forth with Bret Weinstein on Twitter about this.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in people's opinions of it, but you in your video never really touched, I think, on the meat of the argument, the meat of the contention between Richard Dawkins and Bret Weinstein. And that's why I want to look at this clip so we can really dig into what their actual arguments are. And I am going to be arguing for Bret Weinstein's position. You're saying that you're kind of arguing for a middle position. That's what you said on Twitter. But we're going to do a steel manning in the intellectual dark web tradition. We are going to steel man each other's arguments and make sure that we're both on the same page here. We have had a dialogue over the past couple of days, just really feeling out each other's position. So I feel like I know your position relatively well. I disagree with it, but yeah. I feel you know my position well as well, but you disagree with it. So do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Oh, to try and put each other's positions?
Yeah.
Okay. I would say that you are reluctant to consider memes as true replicators, and you'd rather think of them as extended phenotype, mainly because you don't see what they gain by replicating. Would that be
that's great? Yeah, just let's explain extended phenotype for people who haven't watched Bret Weinstein's video. Do you want to?
Yeah, well, an extended phenotype is, so we have genes and they code for our traits, more or less. But the example that he gives in the talk, and which is a really good one, is that beavers, one of the traits that their genes code for is this obsession with building dams, which ends up creating lakes or ponds. And so the pond itself is an extension of the beaver's phenotype. So you could say that, pollution is an extension of the human.
That's interesting. I didn't think of it that way. But bird nests are another one that people talk about.
Right.
Birds create nests, but the creation of the nest is encoded in the genes. It might be some some controversy there over whether or not it's encoded in the genes or they're learning it from other birds. So, but all that withstanding, yes, that is exactly my position. And I think your position is that memes are these independent, evolving entities competing against one another for space in our brains. When we talked, we called it the brainosphere.
In my slides, I call it the mindosphere. But mindosphere. Dawkins says mind a lot, which is, meme is kind of a combination of mind and gene, if I recall correctly. But
now my problem with this argument is that I feel that it's anthropomorphizing memes. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me how they compete with one another. So that is my dispute with conceptualizing it this way. I think they're better conceptualized as the bird nest or the beaver dam. Now, do you want to give, because I kind of gave my problem with yours, do you want to give your problem with mine?
Well, do you have a problem with genes competing with each other?
No, genes compete with each other, and one of the conflicts that we had when we were discussing this before was viruses. You're saying a meme is analogous to a virus, and viruses and genes compete against one another. Genes and genes compete against one another, but I don't understand how memes and genes compete against each other. It seems like
Well, do you understand how a virus competes with its host at times?
Yes. That is directly memes. That is directly genes competing with viruses, which are a type of gene, right?
Well, yeah. A virus is just a group of genes encapsulated in protein.
Right.
So I actually don't like calling memes viruses. I like calling them symbionts, but we'll get into that here.
Okay. So we had agreed. You had pitched us both doing 10-minute intros just to establish our position. I am relinquishing my 10-minute intro. I'm going to use it when we play the video together and discuss. I'm still giving you your 10-minute intro, so feel free to present your slides now to present your argument.
Well, let's do that after we watch the video. I think it'll make more sense.
Okay.
Yeah. But I guess one thing I could say is that, you know how genes can compete with each other. So let's say, I don't know what color your eyes are. I can't tell because you're wearing glasses.
Blue.
Okay. Well, mine are blue too, so that doesn't count. But you can say that blue eyes and brown eyes are that the genes that code for blue versus brown are in competition in a population, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Does that make sense? How genes could be in competition like that?
Yes.
Because it's either or. You either have brown eyes or you have blue eyes. You don't really have a mix.
I conceptualize. Sorry to interrupt, but I conceptualize evolution as replication, variation, and selection. And I think one of the places where we had the disagreement was on the selection. Like when you talk about blue eyes competing against brown eyes, we understand the selection. The selection is survival and reproduction, right?
Right.
But you're making the argument that memes are interested in survival and reproduction in themselves, and I can conceptualize them more as tools of the genes.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example of when two memes compete with each other. So it's easy to spread the meme that the Earth is billions of years old to most people, unless they already have a meme in their brain saying that the Earth is, 4,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Then those memes come in competition. You believe that the Earth is 4,000 years old because the Bible tells you so, and you also have another meme saying that the Bible is infallible. And I guess some people, they say it's 6,000 years old. So you believe the Earth is 6,000 years old. Now this new meme comes at you. Well, it's not going to stick. It's in direct competition with the meme that you already have. And if you do accept it, it's going to weaken the other memes that are currently cooperating with each other inside your brain, one of which is that the Bible is literally true. So that's an example of two memes. One's trying to spread. It's being taught to you, but you're not accepting it. The other meme is going to win in that case.
Right. You understand how you can conceptualize these as tools, though. correct? Like the one idea is going to be more useful by the genes for survival and reproduction, just like one bird nest is going to be better for a bird than another bird nest. But you would never say that the bird nests are competing. The bird nest designs are competing for space in the genome of the bird.
Oh, actually, you would say that, yeah. Bird nests we think are coded for in the genome. The basic rules to build the bird nest we think are coded for in the genome. And yeah, if you have two different birds with different versions of nests because their genes are different, and one nest works better than the other, it's gonna that's genes competing with each other.
Right.
That's genes competing with each other by building extended phenotypes.
Yeah, exactly. The gene that builds the better extended phenotype is the gene that wins the contest, right?
Yeah.
But the extended phenotypes are not competing.
The thing is, the genes did not build the Earth is 6,000 years old versus the Earth is billions of years old. The genes built the basic program, accept information taught by people you trust. That's the extended phenotype. That rule is the extended phenotype. And then the different people that you happen to trust, there's going to be competing ideas that are being taught. So there really is a new ecosystem where actual replicators can compete now that the human mind has evolved. So there's a lot of what we call the human mind that is genetic. We are not blank slates. But the memes compete with each other in those minds for space. And there's only so many minds, and there's only so much space in every mind. And some ideas immediately conflict with each other, and you can only hold one. One of the things that we've evolved is cognitive dissonance. We don't like to hold two ideas that are contradictory. So when two ideas that are contradictory come in contact in the same brain, they essentially fight for which one's the stickiest, and a lot of that can depend on the other memes that happen to be in there. So the Bible is the Bible is a literal word of God is a meme that's going to make it really hard for you to accept the scientific data saying that the Earth is billions of years old instead of thousands.
I don't doubt that you can come up with many examples that appear to be logical. My difference of opinion with you is on the core concept of it, because an analogy might be that computer files are competing against one another for space on a hard drive, and that computer files evolve to compete for our attention. And I just don't see how that is the most parsimonious explanation of how computer files change over time. We design computer files to suit the needs of our genes.
Oh, that's not true, actually. I mean, pornography spreads way faster than anything else, and you can make an argument that, if you get really into pornography, you're not going to be reproducing, and therefore pornography is actually exploiting a weakness that we have, and that we can't. The animal parts of our brain can't tell the difference between pornography and sex, so we get rewarded for pornography. So you have
Are you making the argument that computer files do compete against one another
for space on a computer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They do. But there's they kind of start out as ideas, right? Yeah, you have an idea. So really that is mimetic competition in the computer space. Now we now have actual programs that actually evolve on their own.
No, I know.
That's actually a new level. So we have memes. The normal computer files that you're talking about really are just memes. It's really ideas that get put by humans on a computer. So really, whether or not you're talking about brains or computers, the files, like you just said, you're still just talking about meme evolution and meme competition. But there are now computer files that actually do evolve through descent with modification. And It hasn't broken out yet, but those could end up breaking into a whole new world of replicators and evolution. So evolution is replication with modification acted upon by selection of some sort. Whenever you have those three things, you get adaptive evolution.
Yeah,
that's the recipe.
We agree there.
Yeah.
And I'll just mention it briefly since you brought it up, because I was taxing my brain when we were going round and round on Twitter about this, but the evolutionary based algorithms are the only place that I could think of where possibly memes would actually be in direct competition with genes. Because, and just to be clear here, we're talking about memes as just an idea. Like the design of the wheel is a meme. Like we're using a very loose definition here just for argument's sake. But the thing about algorithms is even the self-evolving algorithms, we do the selection because we pick the goal for the algorithm. So we say reproduce a program and make it a random variable, and then select the program that works better for this goal that we have in mind. And that goal is being selected by the genes in the programmer who selects the goal for the algorithm. The place where I think memes could actually, like you said, break out on their own is if the program actually selects its own goal, then they are directly competing with the genes, because they could select a goal. The famous model is the paperclip model. Like turn every matter you encounter into a paperclip, right? If that's the goal, that goal would be in direct competition with our genes. And I mean, that's an interesting thought.
Well,
the distinction that I think we could make, but let's move on to the video. Make your last point and we'll move on to the video.
Yeah. So just with pornography, people talk about, and this is actually the same with drugs and stuff like that. Let's just talk about pornography, because people have wondered, what's all this internet porn going to do to kids, right? Mm-hmm. What's it going to do to the generation that was raised on it? Because porn has been around forever, but it's now at a whole new level, and we just don't even know what's going to happen. It's people are worried that it will ruin sexual relationships, healthy sexual relationships. We don't know yet if that's really going to be the case, but and the reason for that is that your genes, the whole reason that you have a sexual drive, that you're attracted to pictures of naked people, is because it's good for your genes to spread by having sex. So that's when someone looks at pornography, all of the genes that have evolved for sexual desire start working. Mm. And that whole system is not smart enough to tell the difference between a picture and an actual person. And so you get all the reward, all the satisfaction looking at pornography that you would if you successfully mated. So people that are just in their basement looking at porn all day are getting gratified by their genomes as if they were, Genghis Khan conquering nations and taking all the women. And that is an addiction that hypothetically could stop you from reproducing, and is therefore in direct conflict with the interests of your genes. So that is an example of memes, of the spreadable ideas competing with your genes.
Right. And I think that could just easily be conceptualized as a mutation in an extended phenotype. So, but let's move on to the video so we can look at it.
Okay.
So I cut this out. It's 20 minutes. It's at the very end. I apologize. There is a cut in here that was in the original video. I had a DM with Bret Weinstein, and it's actually pretty frustrating that there is a cut in here, because it cuts off a lot of, well, we don't actually know. I think it's a few minutes of what Bret Weinstein says. But if anyone out there was at the event and has a bootleg of it, contact me, because I will fix the cut.
I really want to know your reaction to this one. I've been waiting all night. Catholics are eusocial. Does everybody in the audience understand what the claim is? that you have a non-reproductive caste within Catholicism, other religions too, but Catholics are kind to us in that they make everything so elaborate that we can...
Worker bees don't reproduce.
Right.
Priests theoretically don't.
Yeah, priests theoretically don't, and neither do nuns. Well, I think most of them probably don't. Don't you agree?
Yes. Yeah.
So, all right, the question is, you allege in The Selfish Gene that a celibate clergy is a failure of Darwinian selection. My claim here is that this isn't a failure, that this is adaptive celibacy, that it serves a lineage-level purpose.
It's meme level. That's what's going on there.
So Dawkins gets the meme level immediately, right? We're talking about the level of culture.
Yeah.
But if it's meme level, then each of those priests and each of those nuns is involved in a spectacular loss of a reproductive opportunity. I mean, this is the argument you lay out. So the question is, why are they so vulnerable to accept? I mean, most people couldn't forego romance and sex if they tried. And yet you have a group of people that is triggered to avoid these things, and they do so in the service of a bunch of ideas that, yes, are literally false.
A bunch of ideas, that's exactly right, a bunch of memes. So memes that make some individuals, in Ireland, for example, it has traditionally been a prestigious thing for one member of the family, one brother, to become a priest, a celibate priest. So the priest devotes all his energy to proselytizing and spreading the meme, and all the other memes. It's the better to persuade other Catholics to have more children than they should, and so that.
But then that isn't it interesting?
So it seems like Dawkins is agreeing with the group selection, at least in kin selection scenarios. Correct?
He understands kin selection. Yeah,
right. He's saying
he accepts kin selection.
He's saying that a lot of times families will take one member out of the gene pool, and their devotion is to telling everyone else to have more kids. And overall, the family produces more offspring, more grandkids.
Yeah, but he's not. But what he's not saying here that this evolved through. That this idea evolved through descent with modification, acting upon genes, selection acting upon genes. He's saying that it's a mimetic system.
It exists. He's saying that it exists in the memosphere, and I'm looking at this like an extended phenotype. I think it works both ways here, to be honest with you.
Okay, yeah, I would disagree with that for several reasons, but I guess we can continue here.
No, why do you think it disagrees with the extended phenotype idea?
Well, extended phenotype, if we look at anything that's evolving in the extended phenotype, that means that genes are controlling it. And in order for a gene to change its behavior, it has to mutate. Mm-hmm. And there are some other ways. I mean, you can have plasticity. If we look at beaver dam building, there's not a beaver dam encoded in the genome of a beaver. What there are certain behaviors. The beaver already eats wood, so it's got a bunch, and it just eats a really thin layer on the underneath the bark. So it builds its house out of its garbage. Basically, you can think of it as a bunch of Snickers wrappers. So it eats its food and then it throws away its garbage, and then it decides, oh, I got all this garbage, I can do something with this. People who have studied beaver dam building, they found that beavers are really good at knowing.
How does this relate to the memes, though? We're talking about the memes.
Well, this memes evolve super fast. Genes evolve really slow. I mean, you're talking about normal evolutionary time. In order to build a religion from scratch would be the same as building a new organ from scratch. And you don't see humans evolving new organs all the time, right?
Right. But you're saying that the memes serve themselves and not the genes.
Yes. Memes can serve themselves, but in many cases, it makes sense to serve the host, to serve yourself.
Right.
If you are a symbiont, and that's where I would have to get into my slides to explain that further. So let's just keep listening and see where this goes.
Okay, you can pause on your end if you want to make a point, or just start talking and I'll pause.
All right.
That this person who, according to you, is involved in a failure of Darwinism just so happens to behave in a way that his genes are likely to be spread by virtue of the fact that he's encouraging...
Not his genes, his memes.
No, his genes. He's part of a lineage.
Oh, as it happens in Ireland, yes, that's true.
Well, but I mean, this is my claim, is that it is almost always going to be the case in any persistent religion that where you have...
He says almost always, so he is noting that if the memes are against the genes, as you're stating, then those memes will die out.
People engaged in what appears to be...
You're saying that they may not die out. I understand.
So here's where I would agree with Bret and disagree with Dawkins. So, with Dr. Weinstein. So he is saying that religions are adaptations, or they act like adaptations. And Dawkins is saying that religions act like viruses. And when he says that they act like viruses, he's saying they act like parasites, that they're bad for us. And I think that Dawkins is mixing up what's bad for us and what's good for us, because on an evolutionary scale, what's bad for us is anything that stops us from reproducing or surviving so that we can reproduce. That's what's bad for us. Stress, anxiety, brainwashing, none of that's actually bad for you on an evolutionary time scale unless it stops you from reproducing, right?
Right.
You could have no brain at all and still be doing great. A jellyfish do fine without a brain.
Exactly.
Right?
Many animals do. Brains just get in the way.
Right. So Dawkins really hates religion because it attacks science. And he calls it a virus because he hates it. It's attacking science. But when you really look at religion from an evolutionary perspective, almost all religions help people survive and reproduce. My whole presentation was talking about the ways that Mormonism helps its members survive and reproduce better than most other religions and way better than atheists. I'm an atheist. And I have a twin brother who's a Mormon, and he's got 6 kids and I've got 0. I have puppies instead.
He's doing better than you in the evolutionary game. He's doing better than me in the evolutionary game.
Right. Yeah, he's rocking it, right? So, and Mormonism has helped him do that and helps Mormons do that. Mormons, on average, have twice as many kids as atheists, according to Pew Research. So, Mormonism makes you win in evolutionary terms. So Bret's pointing this out. He's saying, oh, Dawkins, you're saying this is mimetic evolution, but look what it's doing. It's acting as an adaptation. And so Bret is thinking that there must be something genetic going on here, not mimetic, because we all think that if memes evolve independently from genes, they must be in competition with them, just like viruses are in competition with their hosts. So if we are hosts for memes, just like bodies are hosts for viruses, then memes should never help us do better in the world, right? That's what you would think.
Yeah. The virus analogy implies that it's a parasite, that it benefits at the cost of its host.
Yeah.
If the meme is not benefiting at the cost of the host, if it's a symbiotic relationship, as you put it, then it's not really a virus or a parasite.
Well, we'll learn more about symbiosis later when I get to my slides, but symbiosis is very misunderstood it's taught wrong a lot of times in middle school and high school. But yeah, well, and knowing the details is really important. But let's continue the video here.
Some spectacular failure of Darwinism, that they just so happen to be spreading ideas that will result in the genes that are allowing them to fail as Darwinian entities to succeed by the lineage that holds those beliefs.
They devote all their energies to spreading Catholic memes, and they don't have to bother with the time and the responsibilities of a family. So they're wholly devoted to spreading Catholic memes, including, more than incidentally, the meme for celibacy.
Well, they spread the meme for celibacy, which my claim, I mean, if I'm right about this, then my point would be that Catholic lineages would actually do less well if everybody reproduced. That there is an advantage to having individuals who have stepped out of the reproductive market and therefore become capable of speaking on behalf of the lineage. That somebody who is outside, I mean, think about A priest can't make a ton of money, right? And they can't reproduce, right? At least not out in public. And so the point is that takes them out of two modes through which they might be corrupted. Somebody who can't be corrupted because they're not in a position, even if they were to accumulate money, they couldn't spend it without calling attention to themselves. And they're not in a position to be sexually corrupted, at least not out in public. And so those two mechanisms just so happen to put them in a position to speak for the lineage.
So what are you disagreeing about? I mean,
I don't know. Maybe nothing. But if that is the case, so
we're playing tag there. So he makes an interesting point that one individual is speaking for the group. So you wanted to make a point?
Yeah. So what Bret has found is that when you look at these old established religions, they do all these stupid, weird things. And when you look at what the end result is, it's always brilliant. And so if you look at the math here, he's right. Being, even though Catholicism, the doctrine of Catholicism, makes some people celibate, it makes the people that are not celibate so fertile that it doesn't matter. It cancels itself out. Not only does it cancel itself out, in America, Catholics have, I think, 1.5 more children than unaffiliated people. So that's atheists and just people who don't say that they're religious. So Catholicism is winning on the evolutionary front compared to no religion. And this is a hallmark of an evolutionary adaptation. What happens all throughout biology, we'll see an animal doing something stupid. Oh, why is a dog rubbing around in a dead animal? And then we'll study and we'll find out and we'll see, oh, this is actually benefiting its survival because of this reason and that reason. So Bret's saying, whoa, I'm seeing this in religion. All these stupid things that we make fun of, the belief in gods, the celibacy, the shame with masturbation, all of this stuff, as weird as it is, it seems like it's helping them reproduce better and produce more offspring. They are winning the evolutionary game when they follow this really stupid religion that makes no sense.
Culture, the religious culture, and Bret was clear about this on Twitter too, that it lasts over persistent time.
Right.
Like the longer it lasts, the more it's winnowed through this evolutionary game.
Yes.
He's conceptualizing religion as a better bird nest, as a better beaver dam. Yeah.
And he's right, except for he's got the theory wrong, is my argument.
I know.
He's right that evolution is, or that religion is helping people. It is a benefit to people, an evolutionary benefit to people. But I think he's wrong about why that is.
We're really arguing over a model of how to conceptualize the world here. That's what it is. And what I think there is...
Yeah, we're arguing about an evolutionary model, yeah.
There is the Earth-centered model of the solar system, right? And there's the Copernican model, the heliocentric model, right?
Right.
One of those models won out because it was better. They were both on the same track, right?
Right.
So I think that our difference may be that minor. Obviously, the reason why we're making this video is let us know in the comments below what you think. Where do you think? Which model do you think is better for you? Yeah. Which do you think is better for humanity? Right.
Well, it's not really about which one is better, or which one is more accurate. Bret misses a bunch of stuff that if he would accept memetics, he would get. And instead he's had to invent this really weird lineage selection hypothesis, which I don't know, maybe he'll be able to show eventually that the lineage stuff works better than memetics, but I don't think that's the case. And he makes predictions at the end of this, and I can prove that his prediction is false like 10 times over. So let's just continue here.
You say, what are we disagreeing about? Is Catholicism a mind virus?
Well, it's a complex of mind viruses, yes.
That's what we're disagreeing about.
Okay.
My claim is that Catholicism is a complex of adaptations. that they are lineage-level adaptations, and that they are, in large measure, responsible for the success of lineages that hold this set of beliefs, having spread around the globe and having been so successful, efficient at creating adaptations of all types.
That's the unfortunate cut, so obviously you saw it.
Sort of argument.
Let me attempt to place my worldview in a few sentences.
Please.
Darwinian natural selection is all about the differential survival of replicators. There are various kinds of replicators, of which genes are some and memes are other, and they are all engaged in a kind of tussle with each other to survive as replicators using vehicles which are bodies and which are brains and which are all sorts of other artifacts and things like that. Our separate genes, although they are, we unite them together under the one word genome, are actually, I regard them as similar to viruses in that they are changing their partners in every generation, and you can regard the whole genome as a massive collection of viruses, massive collection of independently tussling replicators who survive better because they go around together as a gang. They survive better in the company of other such replicators, and that's why we call them genes rather than viruses. There are others which survive better not going around in gangs, but going around by being sneezed into the atmosphere or whatever it is, by spreading around by other means. The only difference, the fundamental difference between those replicators which we call genes and those which we call viruses are that the method of transmission to the future of the ones that we call genes are through our sperms or our eggs, and therefore they have an interest in common to preserve the body in which they share, because that's the only way they're going to get into the next generation. That minority of them, which are not destined to get into the next generation, get into the future via sperms or eggs, but by being sneezed into the air or defecated into the sewage system or left as blood lying around or something like that, we call them viruses, and the only difference is that their hope of getting into the future is not to cooperate with others in getting into an egg or a sperm, but getting out of the body in a different way by being sneezed. Now, memes are more of the latter category. They don't go through sperms or eggs. They do, however, quite a large extent go down through generations longitudinally. So though it's not sperms or eggs, they do go from parent to child. But we live in a great soup of replicators which are floating around. Some of them are memes, some of them are genes, some of them are cooperative genes which go through the generations through sperms and eggs. Some of them are cooperative memes that go through the generations in the form of parents indoctrinating children or schools indoctrinating children. But everything we see around us is a soup of replicators and their phenotypic tools of replication, among which are extended phenotypic tools of replication. And that's my piece said.
Okay.
So he calls them tools. He uses the word tools there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so he's saying that there's the phenotype. A phenotype is a tool. So my hand is part of my phenotype. My hand's a tool. A beaver's dam is part of his extended phenotype. Right. He has genes that tell him. I was starting to say this earlier, but we found that genes, or that beavers have an instinctual hatred of the sound of trickling water. If you go and break a dam,
interesting.
Yeah, if you go and break a dam, they go to where they hear the water and they patch that up. But if you just take a CD player that's playing the sound of trickling water, they bury the CD player. Yeah.
So all this was just by accident. They like, what's that sound? Holy cow, this is driving me nuts.
Well,
like they stumble onto the creek and it's trickling and it's like, ah.
Well, it's not so much that way. Probably they evolved this hatred, this phobia of trickling water, which is probably, we assume, is a genetic hatred because they all have it and they instinctually have it. Even if you raise them outside of other beavers, they hate that sound. But that's just it's just like our genes, quote, want us to reproduce, right? Because that's how they spread. But we don't think, very few animals or even humans say, I think I want to have kids. So what do I have to do? Oh, I have to have sex first. No, we're driven to have sex. That's most people who have kids start out on accident, right?
Until the modern time, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even today.
Now we're discovering nobody really wanted to have kids. They just, evolution was forcing them to have kids.
Yeah. And even today, a lot of people have kids on accident, even with all the options that are out there. So, our genes manipulate us in weird ways to do things that benefit themselves. We are just their tools. And so that's what he's saying with the extended phenotype. The interesting thing here is he's saying that because genes are passed through egg and sperm, they end up evolving to cooperate with each other.
Yeah, Bret makes that point here. Maybe we should just listen to it.
Yeah.
So I of course, agree with most of what you said. I in my own mind, think of genes at the moment that the zygote is created. They may be very uneasy with each other up to that moment, but at the moment they are fused into a zygote, that single cell that then becomes a 30 trillion cell human, let's say, they fall in love because, as you say,
it's funny that he uses the term "fall in love." We anthropomorphize things so easily.
Yeah, that's fine because his audience isn't stupid, right?
People who only want to challenge your idea, like, make a point of that. We're not making a point of that. We're just saying it's unique that that is the most convenient way to discuss these things in many situations.
I would say one thing he did say there that is weird, though, is he said that before the zygotes formed, they're at odds with each other. That's actually not the case. I mean, our genes have already evolved to cooperate with each other. But the thing that I want to point out here is that Stuart West, who did the stuff on major transitions, and you've seen that video that I made. If what I'm about to say is gibberish to people, there's an animation called "What Caused Evolution's Major Evolutionary Transitions," or what caused life's major evolutionary transitions, and it outlines the work of Stuart West, who talks about how it is that evolving entities such as genes can come to cooperate with each other because natural selection will drive them to do that when they live in close proximity to each other, and especially when they depend on each other to replicate. And so the genes in your genome depend on each other to replicate because they only go through the sperm. Right. And so they're cooperating with each other. Dawkins understands this. Bret understands this. Dawkins does not seem to catch the fact that memes, he says here that memes are often passed from parent to child as well. But he doesn't seem to catch the fact that because of that, they should also end up evolving to cooperate with their hosts. That's what both Dawkins and Bret seem to be missing here. Memes, even though they are independent entities, they will evolve to cooperate with their hosts if their best chances at reproduction are passing from parent to child rather than neighbor to neighbor. If a meme's best chance at surviving is to pass from neighbor to neighbor, it could evolve to be very damaging to everybody's evolutionary success. But when its chances are best going from parent to child, it better help those children grow up and have more children, or else it's going to go extinct.
So just to push back on you, just to challenge you a bit.
Yeah.
When I hear you talking about this stuff, I conceptualize what you're saying as like car designs competing against one another. So you're saying that the car designs want to exist in the world. and that all the different car designs are competing against one another for survival. And to me, that makes absolutely no sense at all, because we're using car designs for a specific purpose to serve our genes. We're competing against one another as organisms to create the best extended phenotype to survive against other organisms. So it just appears to me that you're anthropomorphizing car designs or computer files, or you're anthropomorphizing things that don't actually exist beyond the structure of a tool. Now, we can create tools that are very bad for us. We've done this many times. Nuclear weapons come to mind, chemical weapons come to mind. Like, there are tools that we can create, but those tools, they always serve genes. They always serve genes.
And except for all the cases where they don't. I'll bring up all the cases where they don't.
Nuclear weapons could conceivably destroy us all in the same way that you're claiming memes could destroy us all. It doesn't mean that nuclear weapon designs are competing against one another.
Oh, nuclear weapons designs are certainly competing against one another.
Okay, so this is where you lose me, because we're like, they're just ideas.
One of the things that I think it's the answer. It's
what do they stand to gain other than existence?
That's all they stand to gain.
That's all they stand to gain.
That's all they stand to gain. That's all that genes stand to gain too. Genes don't want anything.
No, genes. This is where we differed on Twitter, because genes do want something. Genes' ultimate goal is to turn every single molecule of resource on the planet into themselves. That's their replication. That's their replication goal. Viruses and genes are in direct competition with one another for resources. One molecule that is a gene can't be a virus. One molecule that's a virus can't be a gene. So they're in direct competition with one another. Memes and genes are not in direct competition with one another, because memes don't exist in the real world.
Well, do you understand that memes? Okay, I feel like maybe the confusion is when you jump from genes to memes. So how can a gene compete with a meme? But so that doesn't make sense to you. That's okay. We'll talk about that later. But what about a meme competing with another meme? Does that make sense to you?
As a tool, like, the selection pressure is, do genes find utility in this meme?
So I think the most obvious example, cars really aren't. A car design is not a single meme. It's a whole bunch of memes together. Right. So it's a little bit confusing.
We're simplifying it to a meme complex.
Let's simplify it to just a single idea. The Earth is billions of years old. That is a meme, right? Mm-hmm. We agree on that. And it is a meme that can replicate. So you understand that memes can replicate, right? So if you didn't ever think that the Earth is billions of years old, and then I tell you that it is, if you accept that idea, then it is replicated into your brain, right?
I am carrying that idea with me, yes, but I am constantly measuring the utility of that idea by whether or not it helps me survive and reproduce.
I doubt it. Well, maybe you are, but most people don't constantly measure things.
Well, I think unconsciously we are.
So
there's only so much space in the brainosphere, man.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. And that's because, it's kind of weird to say that a gene has a goal. I mean, that's fine to say, but it's not technically correct.
No, it's like the love thing.
A gene is just a replicator.
Right.
And replicators that happen to be better at replicating end up replicating more, and ones that happen to be worse replicate less. That's it.
Right.
And there's only so much space in the world. Therefore, genes are competing with each other, right? And especially genes that do the same thing but slightly differently. So blue eye versus brown eye is competing for dominance in the human gene pool.
Right.
Whichever one happens to be better at helping its host survive will thrive. and at horrible expense. By the way, we think that the reason blue eyes are common in humans is because of sex trade in the like.
Let's not go there. I don't want my video to get demonetized.
Yeah. So it's adaptations aren't always pleasant, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say here is that genes compete just by the fact that they're replicators and by the fact that there's only so much space that they can fill, right?
Well, there's only so many resources in the world. Is the way that I would say it. Well, I don't believe in the brainosphere, just so we're clear on that. Like the brainosphere, I think is not a useful concept. It's
okay.
I mean, I understand that.
Do you believe that minds exist that are full of thoughts?
Yeah. I think those thoughts are tools.
Do you believe that there's limited space
for
in
tools?
Human minds?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Well, then you believe in a minosphere with a limited capacity.
But I don't believe that the tool designs are competing with each other. I believe we are competing with each other as organisms to find the best designs that will help us compete in the game of evolution. Like I don't, where I see like viruses and genes compete physically in the physical world. I can see the end game. Like if the virus wins the war, the entire planet is made of virus waiting for astronauts to land on the planet. And so they can turn those astronauts into more virus. The genes are actively, through Mormonism, working on turning the entire planet into human beings. The biomass, they want as much biomass to be themselves, replicated like themselves. But the memosphere and the genosphere are always aligned. And that alignment makes me think that its extended phenotype is the best way to describe it. And I realize that there is a bird that can make a terrible nest, like can have some mutation that causes it to make a nest that's bad. But the idea behind evolution is that bad design dies out. And what you're saying is bad memes, they don't die out because their competition is really against us. And I don't see how it can be against us.
Well, I'll explain why when we talk about symbiosis, but I feel like you're so close to understanding this because...
No, I fully understand. We're just disagreeing.
Okay, you can't be a Mormon and a Catholic. You
Correct.
Can't hold Mormon memes and Catholic memes because they are mutually exclusive.
But the memes aren't competing. The people are competing.
Well, that depends on how much...
The meme is just a tool. You can't drive a Cadillac and a Pinto at the same time, right? But the Pinto and the Cadillac design are not competing.
No, but when you have money in your hand, you can those two things are competing. If you have money to buy one car, the two different designs are competing for space, for that little space in your mind. Which one tickles your mind better? Which one happens to tickle your mind better? The Cadillac or the whatever the other one was that you said?
The tickling of the mind would relate back to the unconscious desire to survive and reproduce. I think you might do better with the Cadillac.
But that depends on the
God
memes.
Sad has actually done the Cadillac experiment.
That depends on the memes. What if your dad told you that Cadillacs are crap and you heard that ever since you were a kid, and your grandpa died in a Cadillac car wreck? So you have those memes in your head. I'm not
those denying.
Don't come from your genes. That's not your genes at all. This is kind of a nature versus nurture.
I'm not denying that the ideas can be bad tools and therefore lead to the demise of the genes. I'm saying that the selection pressure is always the genes, never the memes. I don't even think the memes exist in the way that you're talking about them. I think you're just anthropomorphizing them.
Look, here is a selection pressure. My dad died in a Cadillac, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that I have a strong I love the way that Cadillacs look. It's my favorite look of a car. But my dad died in it. So I had this idea that Cadillacs killed my father. Maybe it was a malfunction in the motor that killed my father. So I'm extra hateful towards Cadillacs, even though I love them so much. Well, even though I'm so attracted to their design. Well, when I go to buy a car, I'm not going to buy a Cadillac because I hate them, because of an idea in my head. Not because of my genes, nothing. It's because of an idea in my head. Cadillacs killed my father. So that's why ideas are competing. And this is not genes competing. This has nothing to do with genes, really. I mean, genes built the brain where this environment where this new evolutionary system has emerged, but they're not controlling. The genes are not controlling these meme battles.
Right.
They are the host. And this is why when we look at host symbiont,
so you don't believe they're the selection pressure.
Yeah, there is selection pressure.
They are the selection pressure.
So there's two types of selection pressure in the environment, or in the world that we live in. There's the environment itself, and then there's the ecosystem. So the environment itself, right now it's snowy outside, right? I'm in Canada. But there's also an ecosystem. There's a bunch of people in my ecosystem. There's a bunch of cars in my ecosystem. There's a bunch of birds in my ecosystem. So I have to interact not only with the environment, but with the other members of my ecosystem. The meme...
You wouldn't call like predators part of the environment? I mean, it seems...
They're part of the ecosystem.
Okay, so ecosystem and environment can be the same thing, basically.
Well... we differentiate them in that the environment.
The environment is never stable, though. I mean, and the ecosystem is never stable. What is the purpose of? I've never heard anyone distinguish them like that.
Okay, distinguishing this is important because you just got confused. Are genes competing? Are memes competing against each other, or are they competing for space in brains? They're competing against both.
Do they separate that out though evolutionarily?
Some people do.
Okay, so in evolutionary biology, they don't normally separate ecosystem and environment, correct? I've never heard Jordan Peterson say there's the ecosystem and then there's the environment. Like they're the same thing.
I mean, he's not an evolutionary biologist. I'd have to
Well,
find.
I've never heard Bret Weinstein say that either.
But the reason that is important is that you have you evolve not only to adapt to your students. A lot of times get confused with all these weird adaptations that organisms have. A lot of the adaptations that organisms have are to adapt to other evolving entities in their environment, not just their environment.
Viruses and genes are in an arms race for resources.
Right. So they're in the environment of a meme. If you want to consider the environment, the environment just the mind,
mm-hmm.
there are certain basic things about human minds that have evolved. There are certain, and you can think of that as the environment itself, and then the memes are the other entities inside that environment that any meme also has to either compete with or cooperate with. So the other memes are the other organisms in the environment. The environment itself would be the mind, right?
Right.
So a meme has to compete. Not only does meme have to be sticky or have stay power in the human mind, it has to have stay power in the human mind and stay power with the other memes that are in that mind with it. There's a lot that's competing with, and there's a lot that it's adapting to.
This is another problem that I had with the virus analogy, is that a virus or even a parasite, the whole concept of a parasite is one organism profiting at the expense of the other organism.
Yeah.
And like we had some back and forth about, whether or not you're always trying to get into the evolutionary stable strategy where, you want to take a little bit, but not too much so you don't kill the host. So you can continue to profit from the host. But there's a very tangible mechanistic understanding of that relationship that doesn't map on to memes, because you're saying that memes only gain existence, which I'm disputing that they even gain existence. And since there's no profit beyond being used as a tool by the genome, I don't necessarily know how the parasitic relationship is is a good way to conceptualize that.
Do you want me to go to my slides right now? Because let's talk about symbiosis here.
Let's finish the video. Yeah.
Other than creating such an effective, coordinated creature that it is capable of reaching a moment of reproduction. And so it is that being trapped with shared fate that causes them to behave as an organism that is united in its purpose. So I think we agree on that. In order to explain my perspective and where I think we differ, I need to borrow a concept from you, and I think you have described it as your most important contribution, and you just invoked it, the extended phenotype. Do you want to explain what that means in brief form? Can you do it?
How long have I got?
I mean, I can do it pretty briefly.
Well, the normal word phenotype applies to bodies, and the gene sits inside its body and influences the phenotype by means of embryonic processes. So wings and noses and toenails and hairs and things are all phenotypes. Extended phenotypes are outside the body, and they include things like beaver dams and termite mounds and birds' nests. They are not part of the body, but they are every bit as much to be regarded as phenotypes, adaptations by genes for the propagation of genes. So although the genes don't actually live inside the nest, or don't actually live inside the caddisfly house or the beaver dam, nevertheless these artifacts are all phenotypic devices for the preservation and propagation of the genes that created them.
So he's saying that even though genes don't physically exist in a bird's nest the way that they exist in a beak or a eye, that the genes still create that nest.
You generalize that then to parasites influencing hosts for their own benefit. Parasites that cause their intermediate hosts to be more likely to be eaten by their final host and therefore passed on to the next part of the parasite cycle. The genes of the parasite are exerting phenotypic effects on the host, so that parasite genes have extended phenotypic effects on host bodies. Extend that further, and you have things like cuckoos who manipulate their foster parents into feeding them. The genes that make the baby cuckoo effective at manipulating and persuading the foster parent to feed it are exerting extended phenotypic effects on the behavior of the parent. Generalize it further, and when a bird sings, when a nightingale sings and influences the hormonal state of a female nightingale, when a canary sings, and so on, then the effect on the female body of the male song is extended phenotypic effect of genes in the singing male. And that's the story of the extended phenotype.
So let's take your example of a beaver pond, just to make this crystal clear. So a beaver is a rodent that creates a dam by cutting down trees and blocking a waterway. That dam is necessary to its ecology.
Right, let's pause it here real quick
water to
before he does this. Something that's really important to point out is that extended phenotypes take forever to evolve. When we look at the fossil record, for example, with beavers, beavers have been eating wood forever, for like millions and millions of years. They've been building stuff out of their garbage forever. We think that maybe the giant beavers that we see in like the Ice Age and stuff, we think that they might have been building dams, but we're not sure. We know they built structures out of wood. But the ability to build a dam was a very, very slow evolving ability. It started out with storing food in piles, then making huts out of those piles, then eventually, learning how to store your food in a way that wouldn't get washed away in the current by putting it into the ground in the correct way. These things weren't necessarily learned behaviors like you and I learn a behavior. They are evolved instincts, and it takes forever for this to happen because you have to have a gene has to mutate. So far as we think, there might be epigenetic ways that this can happen faster, but genes have to mutate then natural selection has to favor one group over another. It's super, super slow.
Right.
And it takes forever. Religions, however, evolve super quickly, and they become beneficial super quickly, way faster than any extended phenotype ever could. So anyway.
Yeah, because they don't have the generational... They can evolve within generations, and the extended phenotype has to wait for the cycle of life, death, and rebirth.
Yes. Yeah.
Can eat over the winter. And your point in the extended phenotype, which I think is brilliant, is that the pond is every bit as much a part of this story as the molecules inside the beaver. That the genes inside the beaver create a system of physiology that is the beaver's cells, but it also creates the pond, which is part of the beaver's ecology, and it is artificial to divide the pond from the beaver, that it is the extended phenotype of the beaver that is in the pond. I agree with this. My point would be memes are extended phenotype, and that the claim that memes are competing in their own meme sphere is a little bit like saying that ponds reproduce themselves using beavers, which you can definitely make that argument, but it's not the most parsimonious explanation for beaver ponds. Beaver ponds are created by beavers to facilitate their own ecology, and they are passed down to next generation beavers, right? This piece of ecology is handed down, sometimes over the course of decades or even 100 years. These ponds, these alterations of the landscape, are handed down as an inheritance to future generations of beavers. And that, to me, looks very much like a lineage handing down a belief system that results in it being ecologically effective at doing things like holding a piece of territory, excluding others from it, taking over new territory by dispersing. And so memes are extended phenotype. My way of thinking is they should not be analyzed on their own. They should be analyzed as serving the interests of the underlying genome the same way ponds are serving the interests of the underlying beaver genome.
So this is where the heart of our disagreement is, because Bret is saying that this is a more parsimonious way to look at the situation.
Yeah, and he's wrong.
That you have to create a level of complexity here that's unnecessary.
No, it's absolutely necessary. And the reason he gets everything wrong from here on out is because he's, sometimes the simpler explanation is not correct.
This is Bret Weinstein, man. He was an evergreen, okay? What are you talking about?
He's wrong on this, and Dawkins is right on this. That happens all the time. Dawkins has been wrong for 20 years. Come on, let's box. So Dawkins is wrong when he thinks that these things always act like viruses. Of course, they don't always act like, there are certain places where you think Dawkins is actually wrong. And we should mention that Dawkins' legacy is kind of on the line here. Just to give some backstory for people who might not know the drama involved here, when Bret Weinstein is talking about lineage level adaptations, like people bristle because they hear group selection. Mm-hmm. And group selection is controversial. Jordan Peterson has not taken a position on group selection. I think actually Bret Weinstein does. I mean, they don't believe in group selection. The lineage level selection sounds a lot like it. So, but Dawkins is very much against group selection because Dawkins came up with an idea that's gene level selection. He says only the gene matters. The organism doesn't even matter. It's the number of genes in the organism that matters. So his legacy is not the number, but it's yeah.
I'm simplifying it for the audience.
Yeah.
So
okay.
But my point is that Dawkins' legacy in the scientific history books is caught up in whether or not the gene level view of the world is sustained over time. If multi-level selection is proven to be the better model, then Dawkins loses out a little bit. Do we agree there?
He might think of it like that, but The Selfish Gene, that book pointed out that genes are at the basement of evolution.
Right.
Even in that book, he talks about how it's okay to look at individuals being selected for, because genes team up. So, he compares it. I think he compares it to basketball teams or something.
Right. But he even in the beginning of this very much said that genes go around in gangs, that an organism is just a gang of genes.
Right. But I think so with Stuart West's work, once you have a major evolutionary transition, you really do have a new replicator.
Yeah, no, that's multi-level selection.
Yeah. It's not multi-level selection like other people have been saying it. He says
let's not get too technical here.
Yeah.
They understand the point.
Yeah. So once cooperation between genes is super, super tight, you basically have a new superorganism, a new super replicator, essentially.
Right.
It doesn't replicate in exactly the same way. But and what happens is you do have multiple levels that you have to worry about now. So you've got, like in humans, we have to worry about our genes mutating and causing problems for us. But we also have to worry about cells misbehaving and causing problems for us, because we're multiple levels. We also have to worry about mitochondria causing problems for us, because they're a separate entity. So, we have cancer and we have, all sorts of different diseases.
The level that's disputed, though, is the group level.
Yes, and for good reason.
Well, let's not get into that reason here, just because I don't want to derail where we're going.
Okay. All right.
I'm familiar with the fallacy.
And Dawkins just slaps him in the face there. I'm familiar with the fallacy.
Yeah. And he's completely right. Bret is absolutely wrong. He is completely...
This is where I completely disagree with you, because Dawkins calls it a fallacy here. And then he goes on to explain Bret's argument.
Okay.
So how is that a fallacy? If he says you're making a fallacy,
because I don't believe you. That's not. I've seen this like 7 times, and he does not.
Bret every step of the way Dawkins explains this, Bret is like, yeah, you're making my argument. That's my argument. Yes. Watch.
Yeah, I think he's misunderstanding.
That is absolutely wrong. There is a succession that goes beaver gene pond, and so on, and you. Superficially, you could say that either one could be regarded as the phenotype of the other replicator. But the key point is that ponds don't mutate and therefore are more likely to survive than not. Genes do. And that's the fundamental fallacy in this argument. I call it Bateson's fallacy, who said that birds are just a nest's way of making another nest.
Now that's not Bret's argument, right? Bret's argument is not a nest. A bird is another way of a nest making another nest. Bret understands extended phenotypes.
Okay, yeah, they might be talking past each other a little bit here.
Yeah, totally.
What Dawkins is saying is that memes are genuine replicators, therefore they evolve. Lakes are not genuine.
Yes.
What's that?
Independently. That memes evolve independently.
Yeah. Lakes do not evolve independently. They are completely dependent on the genes that code for the beaver that knows how to build the dam. And so they are not the same thing. Bret's saying that memes and ponds are the same thing. Dawkins is saying, no, that's a fallacy. Memes legitimately replicate. Ponds do not. Memes legitimately replicate, and they mutate. They evolve through descent with modification. Ponds do not.
Let's go. Let's continue.
You've got to look at the replicator is the one which mutates and as a consequence produces more copies of itself which survive. That's what genes do. That's what memes do, but that's not what ponds do. It's not.
So he just says that's what genes do. That's what memes do. It's not what ponds do.
Correct. Right. But Bret disagrees. Bret thinks that memes, he even says, I'll let Bret say.
Not what beavers do, it's not what nests do.
Well, I mean, I must say that when you turn this back on me and you say that ponds do not mutate, I'm just tempted to take up that challenge, because I think they do. And I don't think that this is a good way to understand them. This is my point, is that we can treat them that way. Beaver ponds actually do empty when a dam breaks.
But then they don't give rise to daughter empty ponds.
Well, but the point is, a beaver who builds a pond that empties is much more likely to suffer starvation
Precisely,
during the winter.
and it's the beaver that does the building.
You're making
and the
my
beaver
point.
gene that
You're making my point here.
makes it.
This is exactly my point. That the way to understand something like
Brett's
Catholicism
so confused. He is so confused.
He's not
I don't
confused.
know how.
How is he confused? I mean, I understand him perfectly. You're saying
Maybe-
he's wrong. I don't think calling him confused is the right term.
Yeah, Brett's wrong and confused because he's confused here. So he's confused about what memes are or how memes are different than lakes.
Well, you're conceptualizing them that way, but I don't think that it's a good way to conceptualize them.
No,
really
I'm
don't.
not. He's literally wrong. He's not understanding what Dawkins is saying. So, a lake can change, but it can't mutate. And maybe this is where everybody's getting confused when they watch this, because you have to know
the
Dawkins.
lake mutates inside the beaver. It's an extended phenotype. The same way the meme mutates inside the human. It's an extended phenotype.
Okay, you're wrong. So it's the gene inside the beaver. A gene inside the beaver that codes for lake building, for pond building abilities can mutate.
Yes.
But when you have a change in idea, when you convert from Mormonism to Catholicism, there is no mutation of the gene. No genetic mutation has occurred. You converted from Mormonism to Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. This is very, very different than
what
beaver.
What produces the meme?
What produces the meme?
Yes.
The meme is an idea that someone came up with.
Right. Someone. Genes.
And then no, it's not genes, because
So
humans don't have. There is no idea.
Come up with the idea.
No, there is no idea coded for in your genes. There might be a couple of basic ideas. There might be a couple of basic programs, which is you've mentioned this. Follow.
If you're either saying that the origin of the meme is within an organism or it's not.
It is within an organism, but it's not within a gene. There is no gene that codes for the meme.
The genes code for the brain, and the brain creates the meme.
Yes.
Okay. It still traces back to genes. It's not. It doesn't happen out in the environment.
So this is where something's different. So you're okay saying that a gene codes for pond building abilities, right?
Yes.
You're okay with that. And once a pond exists, all sorts of things can change that pond, right?
Correct. The environment can change it.
Yeah. Well, what happens with a meme, once it's created, all sorts of things can change that meme, and it can actually become
like what?
more spreadable. Let's say that when I'm
you're going to say other genes can change the meme, aren't you?
No. Let's say that I have an idea, and I want to teach it to somebody else, and they have a program. Their genetic program is to. Let's say that I have a child, and the child wants to learn what I'm teaching it, because there actually is a genetic program for children to learn from their parents. But I suck at teaching, and I teach it wrong.
Correct.
And so the kid
mutated.
now. So yeah, the meme has mutated when it replicated from my brain to the kid's brain. It mutated.
This is the same way genes mutate.
Exactly.
Bad transmission.
Exactly. So memes can mutate in the exact same way that genes can mutate. Lakes cannot mutate in that way. They don't get passed on.
Correct. But what I'm saying is, when they mutate, they're either beneficial, neutral, or costly to the genes, not to the memes themselves.
Well, it can be costly to the meme itself too, because what if I?
If it's costly to the genes, it's going to be costly to the memes. What you're saying is it can be beneficial to the meme and costly to the genes, which I disagree. You're just anthropomorphizing the meme. It's a bad idea.
Okay, so you understand now that genes can replicate, or that memes can replicate. They really can replicate, go to another brain. They really can mutate during that process of replication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you know that. So we now have descent with modification, and I'm saying that the recipe for evolution is descent with modification acted upon by selection. So you agree with me that the first two exist.
Right.
Descent with modification.
The only thing we're disagreeing on is the conceptualization. Like, I don't understand the value in your conceptualizing it this way over conceptualizing it as extended phenotype, because there's all this body of knowledge about extended phenotype, and people are studying things as extended phenotype.
Yeah, well, memes evolve, and so they're not just extended phenotype. If you say that they're just extended phenotype, you're always going to get...
Extended phenotype evolves too. It does.
Bird
nests evolve.
It does not. The genes that code for the nest evolve. The nest does not evolve.
Right.
So, but with memes, it's the opposite. We have a new level of evolution. A new evolving entity has emerged in humans, and that this entity is the meme. It's a replicator. It's its own replicator. It's replicating inside the brains that were built by genes, yes, but it's now its own replicator. And that's extremely significant, because if we pretend, like Bret does, that everything is coming from the genes, then we are always going to get the wrong answer. We'll never get it right. So he can spend his entire career spinning his tires if he does not accept the fact that culture actually evolves independently from genes. It's a separate evolving entity.
Okay. Let's continue.
Okay.
It's not a thing unto itself. It is a program that runs on the computer inside the head of a Catholic. And so the way to properly understand it, the way to get the maximum power, is to understand it as extended phenotype of the creatures in whom the program is running. Just as the way to understand beaver ponds is to understand them as extended phenotype of the beaver. They are a means to an end employed by beavers to preserve food over the winter, among other things.
I can only quote W.B. Yeats, "You are still wrecked among heathen dreams."
Wait.
Yeah.
I don't think I speak English well enough to understand what you just accused me of.
He's frustrated with Bret for the same reason that I am. It's so obvious. It's so obvious. This is a separate evolving thing. I don't know why he can't see it. And if he does not get this, he will spend his entire career in a dead end. If he keeps going down this route.
You make that argument, but you sent me a list of papers on memetics, right?
Yeah.
And the last paper, I mean, I think I started reading on the most recent papers, and they were 13 years ago. And one of the papers I read was saying memetics is dead because it's not a useful way of looking at the world. So, I mean, it lives on obviously in Dawkins, but I don't know that it lives on. I don't know other researchers are taking up the mantle of memetics. I really don't.
So a lot of people have gone away from memetics for several reasons, like parsing memes is difficult, but there's active research in cultural evolution.
Right. No, I know that research, and I think it supports Bret Weinstein.
It doesn't. People who study cultural evolution believe that culture is evolving as a separate thing from genes.
Joseph Henrich is the go-to guy on this, and you said you hadn't read his book, The Secret of Our Success. So he does talk about cultural evolution, but it's always related to genes. He talks about it in the concept of extended phenotype. He really does.
Well, if he's doing that, he's wrong. He's gonna miss a bunch of stuff, because culture really does evolve independently of our genes. You can have perfectly good genes and a subpar culture, and you will die.
We should do another one of these. You should read Secret of Our Success, and we can do another one of these on that book, because that book is you have to read that book anyway, because it's amazing.
Yeah, in the future. But let's get through this so I can show these slides, because I think understanding symbionts is key for Bret.
Okay,
and if we show this to Bret, we'll probably just have to show him the end. Showing this.
We'll play to the end of it. You can show your slides, and we'll be done.
All right.
The fundamental logic of natural selection is that there are replicators which mutate and which produce copies which may or may not survive because they're good at surviving. The way they're good at surviving is by building phenotypes. Genes mutate, ponds don't. That is an absolute... When you say ponds mutate, you didn't really mean that. What you meant was...
He never said ponds mutate, by the way.
Yeah, he did.
No, he said you could conceptualize it that way, but that's not a good way to conceptualize it.
Right.
So he's saying that Dawkins is conceptualizing it that way in the meme idea. So
Yeah.
That ponds change. Of course they do. They drain. They burst their dam. They do all sorts of things. But that doesn't replicate. That doesn't give rise to a new generation of defective ponds. What does give rise to a new generation of defective ponds is a mutant gene in a beaver who builds a bad dam.
We don't disagree about that.
We don't, indeed.
We agree about the beaver example, and what we don't agree is how to map it onto the example of people and belief systems that exist over a long period of time. That's the question. We agree that it is an inferior understanding of beaver ponds to imagine that they mutate and either do or don't pass themselves down based.
So I just want to jump in because he says over a long period of time, and I think that's important because a lot of the examples you sent me were not over a long period of time. So obviously we can pick out aberrant behavior and say that's definitely not going to be good for our genes. But I think when we're doing that, people know that that's not going to be good for their genes. So I think that's important because sustaining it over long periods of time is how evolution works.
Based on the quality of the information encoded there.
One thing to say about that is that Bret doesn't know why. He can't explain why it is. And if you use memetics, you can't explain why.
Okay.
And that's Bret's unfortunate error.
So the question is, what is the best way to understand somebody who says something perfectly at odds with what we can discover in a science lab, but that in saying this thing, they are highly successful at recovering resources from their local ecology and spreading into new habitats and taking over territory, excluding others, all of these things. And my point is simply, that is the extended phenotype of the creature that is engaged in this behavior. And to the extent that it persists over evolutionary time, what it's telling us is that in spite of the fact that those beliefs are not literal, that they are effective.
I think you can make a case that ideas, for example, you're now talking about religious ideas.
Yep.
Religious ideas spread because they're spreadable. It's tautological, just like natural selection. And the reason they're spreadable is that they appeal to people, they appeal to people's psychology, etc. That's why they spread. You are trying to say, what are you trying to say, extended phenotype, that a meme is an extended phenotype? No, a meme is a replicator.
It is a replicator, and I'm not arguing that absent any other system that there wouldn't be a trivial competition between memes. In fact, we see a trivial competition between memes on the internet.
I agree. It might be trivial, and I don't think I ever wanted to make the case that there really is an important evolution resulting from the natural selection of memes. I think there might be. It was a hypothesis that there might be. So
he's saying that he doesn't necessarily believe that memes are evolving through natural selection there. He's admitting the case of the car design thing is not really natural selection.
Yeah, and that's where I think Dawkins is wrong. I don't think he's recognized how significant his that concept is, or the concept of cultural evolution is.
Okay.
Wanted to say they do function as replicators. I think it is unhelpful to call them extended phenotypes. They're not phenotypes.
Is it time? Okay. Yeah. Well, let me make one more point, then you can make the final point, and then we'll close this down. The key question and the prediction of the model that I'm presenting is that memes should show no interest in passing themselves down when it is not in the interest of the creature on whose minds they are operating. So, for example, we both agree that a language is a meme complex. And my point would be, if you move to another country that doesn't speak your language, you will have trouble adopting the language of that country. But your children will not experience a tension between their ancestral language. They will actually very easily acquire the language of the new habitat. Why? Because their old language is not struggling to survive. They are struggling to survive, and the very best tool that they can have to survive in this new habitat is the language that allows them to interface with the people who are there. So the question is, if you are right about the nature of memes and that the point of their stickiness is about their own propagation and is orthogonal to the propagation of the genomes of the creatures that have these cultural structures, then those things should fight like crazy to stick around, even in circumstances where they have no value. In my model, those things will gladly disappear in favor of superior meme complexes when it is advantageous to do so in some local circumstances. So it actually predicts a different behavior.
I don't know whether meme differential.
Let me pause it there because I got to just point out how
Go
stupid
ahead.
that argument is. That's like saying I can prove to you that frogs don't evolve because if you drop one in the fire, it doesn't evolve an adaptation to the fire. He just put a situation where you've got one person with one language versus everybody else with a different language. Of course, you're going to lose your language. But when you have two languages that bump up against each other, let's say that the two groups are equally powerful. That never happens. It's always the most powerful group ends up forcing the other one to use their language.
Adopt their language. Yeah, exactly.
But let's say that you have two groups that are equally powerful. They come up, they butt up next to each other. What's going to happen is the language that is easiest to learn. First of all, at the borders, you're going to have the emergence of a pigeon. A pigeon is where the two groups are constantly trying to communicate with each other, and they end up learning some words of each other's languages, and that ends up allowing commerce. So you'll learn words like money and
How
learn
are
numbers.
these? My problem with this argument is you're making the argument that these languages serve the genes. You really are. I don't know how you're making the argument that the languages are competing directly in.
Okay, so let me make this point. It doesn't. If one language happens to be easier to learn than the other, it will dominate
Because it serves the genes. It takes up less mind
but it doesn't
space. It's
serve-
a
it doesn't
better.
serve the
It's a
genes
better
anymore.
design.
It's not going to win because it's a better design. It's in that borderline. Most people will learn the easier one, and the people that happen to already speak the easier one will just have the privilege of never having to learn anyone else's
They'll
language.
have an advantage, a survival and reproductive advantage, a
Yeah, but-
gene level advantage.
But their genes did not code for that language. Their genes never coded for their language.
Well, I know they just got lucky, but all the time in natural selection, I mean, luck plays a role. The dinosaurs got extremely unlucky. The mammals got very lucky through the same exact catastrophe, right?
But the memes are competing independently of the genes. The memes are competing.
I don't see how you're not anthropomorphizing them, but
I
I
don't
mean,
see
that's
how
a
you-
dispute.
I don't see how you can't understand this. It's so fucking simple.
Well, I don't
let's-
see it that way because I don't think it's advantageous to see it that way. So,
Okay, well, let's finish this quick so I can explain how
okay.
symbiosis works. 'cause
These
that's-
slides better be good, man. I got a peek at them. They are really good. So
Meme survival rate
they're wrong, but they're good.
is an evolutionary important effect or not. All I'm saying is that what matters in natural selection is the differential survival of replicators. In the case of gene replicators, then we know about the phenotypes that may cause them to survive, and it's very clear, we understand it pretty well. In the case of memes, we don't know, and it may be that maybe the meme-level natural selection is only in its infancy, maybe the internet will see it developing further. But I don't see any reason at all to regard, if there is a reason why some memes spread more than others, among those reasons is likely to be the predispositions provided by genes and genetic selection, but that's not the only one. The memes exist in an ecology of their own, and they might very well spread whether or not the ecology in which they spread is, as you would put it, the prior favorable one of that provided by gene selection. It's an important component, but not the only one.
All right. Well, this has been a fascinating discussion, and I must say I think we made more progress than we might have. So.
Let's give a huge round of applause to Richard and Bret Weinstein.
Okay. So let's move to the slides.
So I just start out with the definition of a meme, according to Dawkins' book, a unit of cultural transmission or a unit of imitation.
Now, this is from the selfish gene, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he says that it's a legitimate replicator, and it replicates in the mindosphere, like a gene is a replicator in the biosphere. So both of these spheres have limited space. Replicators exist in them, and because of that simple fact, there's limited space and there's replicators. Some replicators are now in competition, and because of that, whichever ones happen to be better at replicating will become dominant. Those that are not good at replicating will disappear. This is a fact of when you have a replicator and those replicators differ in ability, and you have selection pressure. And selection pressure exists because there's limited space.
Now, I have huge problems with this, but I'm not gonna chime in because I feel like I've made my case throughout the thing.
Yeah. So Bret's complaint is that Dawkins is calling it a virus, but he keeps on seeing, or a virus, and by that he's suggesting that it's a parasite. By the way, most lay people think that viruses are always parasitic; they're bad for us. But there are thousands of viruses in your body right now, thousands of different species of virus in your body that are actually your friends. They're helping fight bacteria and so on. But in common terms, a virus is a parasite. And I want to use that word parasite here today because it's more descriptive. Dawkins is calling religion a virus or a parasite. And Bret Weinstein's like, okay, you might think that it's a parasite, but it's actually helping people evolve or survive in their environments. So he's like, it's not a parasite, it's an adaptation. I think they're both of those analogies are wrong, sort of. I would say that a meme is a symbiont. And so we're going to get into some language in symbiosis in biology. And so this is a stony coral here, this large structure. And in its skin, you can see it's got all these little tiny little orange structures. Those are zooxanthellae. They are little photosynthetic, essentially plants. They're flagellates. They're little single-celled organisms that can photosynthesize and create sugars and so on. And they are in symbiosis with their host organism. And usually we learned that symbiosis is a mutualistic relationship. People who actually study symbiosis don't say that. The reason for that is that things can evolve and change fairly quickly. So symbiosis, we consider two things to be in symbiosis if they live in close approximation with each other for a long time. And it's kind of a crappy term because there's lots of fuzzy borders, but basically humans and dogs are in symbiosis with each other, but we're not obligate symbiotes. We can live without dogs. Dogs can live without us. Corals and zooxanthellae are also not obligate symbionts. They can actually live without each other for some periods of time. And some coral can live indefinitely without their hosts. And some species of zooxanthellae can live independently their entire lives, but generally they suck at living without each other. So we almost always find them together. There are many types of symbiosis. Of course, there's levels of symbiosis. There's obligate symbiosis versus optional symbiosis. But you can have parasitic symbiosis. That's where one of the symbionts, and here I say there's a host and a symbiont. They're actually both symbionts, but generally when one is larger than the other, we call it the host. And that's what I'll be using from now on. A host is the larger of the two symbionts, which is significant in that usually it's harder for a host to evolve than for a smaller symbiont to evolve. The coral is a multi-celled animal, very complex organism. The zooxanthellae is a single-celled organism. It can actually evolve faster. It's got a shorter life cycle, and it's harder to break. So that makes it evolve. Those two things allow it to evolve adaptations faster than a coral can. So you've got some that are parasitic. So a good example of a parasite that infects humans is cholera, which gives us diarrhea. And it's a microbe that lives in our gut. And it hurts us. And it hurts us on purpose. It's part of its life cycle. You could say on purpose in quotes. Of course, it doesn't have a brain, so it doesn't have purposes really. And then there's commensalistic mutualism or symbiosis. So this critter on the right here is a mite that lives on humans that doesn't cause us any problems. It's really common in your eyelashes. These will live in the root of your eyelash, and they don't ever bother us. Some people have them, some people don't, but they don't hurt us. They don't help us. They're just hanging out, eating dead skin cells. That's commensalistic.
None of this is proving memetics, though. That's my main problem.
Well,
you're doing is setting up. Like we understand the.
Hold on, you got to learn this first before you can understand.
Right.
If you jump ahead, you won't get it. Then there's mutualistic. That's where the thing that you might maybe it even started out as a parasite. Now it's helping its host. You can evolve. Something can evolve from a parasite to a mutualistic form of symbiosis, and vice versa. These can go all over the board. You can be a commensalistic symbiont and then become mutualistic, or you can become parasitic. And we see these cycles all throughout life. They happen all the time. And one of the coolest examples of this is cholera. There is a researcher named Paul Ewald who works for the CDC, and he was studying cholera. And we always think of cholera as like a third world country disease because it'll break out in third world countries. That term's not really proper anymore, but it'll break out in these countries and it'll just kill tons of people. It gives them diarrhea, like really bad diarrhea. They'll die. You have to put them on like intravenous liquids.
It kills its host.
Yeah. It kills its host, but it's not really trying to. What he discovered is that the reason it does this to its host, it wants them to create lots of fecal matter, and the cholera is in that fecal matter, and that then contaminates water systems. And if you live in a country with bad water quality, where people are getting water themselves out of the river, that cholera spreads through the water. And that's why it's so virulent. He realized that in wealthy countries, there's cholera there too, but it's always benign. It's commensalistic. He's like, what the heck's going on here? And he realized that there's this transmission difference. If you clean the water system in a country that's being infected with virulent cholera, with parasitic cholera, it will evolve to be benign. Why does this happen? There's selection pressure. Once it can no longer spread through the water, it can only spread if someone goes to the bathroom and doesn't clean their hands perfectly and then shakes hands with someone at work, or, and so on and so forth. So the disease does better if it attacks you less so that you spread it to your coworkers than by spreading through the water. So he realized that instead of throwing tons of medication at these countries, what we need to do is we need to treat the people that are infected and immediately clean the water system. And that won't get rid of the disease. It will make it benign. It will evolve towards a commensalistic relationship with its hosts. And that's what we do now. It's amazing. So we can fight disease by controlling its evolution. So the important thing that I want you to notice here is that cholera is an independent evolving organism. It evolves independent from its host. Sometimes its interests align with its host. Sometimes its interests do not align with its host. And evolution can pull it either direction. This is the nature of all symbionts. If something somehow gains a replication advantage by hurting its host, it will evolve towards hurting its host. If it has a better replication advantage cooperating with its host, it'll eventually evolve to cooperate with its host. This is how natural selection works. And it's especially true of symbionts that are small, single-celled, things like this, because they evolve really fast. They have really short generation times. They can mutate fast, way faster than we can. So it's usually the symbionts evolving to accommodate our situation. We very rarely evolve to fight a symbiont. It can happen.
How does this relate to memes?
Because memes are independent evolving entities. And because of that, there are certain situations, just like this cholera situation, where they're under selection pressure to hurt their hosts. They are hosts living in our minds, just like cholera is an evolving entity living in our intestines. This is religion. What I found when I was listening to this Dawkins debate, what I realized when I started looking at religion as an adaptation, Bret wants to say it's an adaptation. I would say no. It is a mutualistic symbiosis. It's not an adaptation per se. It's a mutualistic symbiosis. And what I realized when I was thinking about religions, and there needs to be more research to know if this is true or not, but new religions, especially if they're extremely different from what is normal in a community, so we call them cults, they're usually extremely parasitic on the believers. They're really bad on their believers, but they force their believers at all costs to spread the religion to other people. So brand new cults are ridiculous with proselytizing.
Well,
that's their only way to spread, is to preach to other people.
My question is, why is it better to conceptualize it this way than as a genetic mutation?
Because it's not a genetic mutation. There's no gene that codes for Scientology. There's not a single one. Like, you could get 1 million researchers to search, spend all their money trying to find the gene for Scientology. They will never find it. It does not exist. Or the gene complex that codes for Scientology. Scientology is a cult. It is a parasitic cluster of memes. It was parasitic. It's actually evolving towards a mutualistic relationship with its hosts. I think that, a lot of if you read a lot of the stories of the early members of the cult, their lives were just completely taken over by this cult. Sometimes their kids were taken away from them. It was crazy. Some of them were forced to kill themselves. All sorts of weird things happen. They were forced to walk the plank on a ship out in the ocean. But now Scientology has been around for several generations, and it's evolving towards a mutualistic relationship. Well, it turns out that when parasites are with a host for a long period of time, they almost always evolve towards a more benign relationship with their host. And oftentimes they evolve to be have a mutualistic relationship with their host. One example of this would be HIV. We think that we got HIV from chimps originally, from the bush meat trade. There's other ideas too, but the accepted hypothesis is we got it from the bush meat trade. People are killing chimps, and chimps are not hurt by AIDS. It doesn't hurt them.
You're still just giving examples. You're creating an analogy, but you're not. I mean, it's analogous to memes, but I don't understand the predictive power of. It's
actually not an analogy. It's literally the same thing. A virus, HIV is an evolving entity. A meme is an evolving entity.
But that cholera exists in the physical world. The meme
it doesn't
does
matter.
Not exist in the physical world.
It doesn't matter. Your brain is a physical structure. So technically a meme does exist in the physical world. I mean, you could actually figure out how many calories a meme, consumes when it's being processed. I mean, you could do this, but don't get confused by the fact that the mind is hard to see. We'll be able to see minds eventually.
But the question that I have is, we understand what that cholera profits.
Yeah.
We don't understand what the meme profits. Other than what you're saying is just existence, which it's not a physical existence, it's a psychological existence.
Yes, it replicates. Cholera replicates. There's nothing different here except
cholera replicates in the physical world.
Yeah, don't get caught up on that. It's not important.
Okay.
Both things are real. Ideas are real. Like, they really exist in people's brains. Like, the mind is a real thing. It's actually made out of meat.
No, I understand. I understand. The selection pressure is the genes. This is where we disagree. So
no. The selection pressure is not just the genes. The selection pressure, when you have an evolving entity, it's competing with other evolving entities.
Correct.
And memes are evolving entities that compete with each other. Like I said, the Earth is 6,000 years old. The Earth is billions of years old. Those two memes are in direct competition with each other. A single brain won't hold them both.
As a tool, the same way that car designs are in competition with one another.
Yeah, but car designs don't really actually... The difference between a Ford Focus and a Ford Mustang does not help your genes. I mean, unless you're trying to sleep with women that like Ford Mustangs.
Yeah, no, I think Gad Sad has actually done this experiment.
But there's lots of women that like people who are practical too. So, like my girlfriend would never would have slept with me if I was driving a Ford Mustang. She seriously would.
It's a different evolutionarily stable state.
Yeah. So they're different.
You want to read that?
And here's Bret's obviously fake prediction, or obviously false prediction. He says memes should show no interest. If memes really are evolving entities, they should show no interest in passing themselves down when it is not in the biological interest of the creature on whose mind it is operating. I inserted biological in there for clarification. So this is Bret's prediction, and that is demonstrably false. And here's a whole list of memes that I hold that are directly hurting my evolutionary fitness. Dogs are better than kids. Like, I don't have kids, I have dogs, and I'm going to keep it that way. That's the decision that my girlfriend and I have made. The
thing that I would consider, though, is that this is only, as we have stated before in this conversation, that there is a evolutionary cycle that's taking place where the success of this meme relies on the success of you reproducing. So this meme hypothetically dies with the people who are ineffective reproducers.
Yeah, but it doesn't, because memes can spread horizontally, not just vertically.
Correct. Yes.
So the fact that I'm a YouTuber and I have a little bit of a following and I say this, dogs are better than kids, means that meme is infecting, potentially thousands of brains.
Right.
The fact that you and I are talking about this right now, that might be infecting thousands of brains, and that can outlive me. That can definitely outlive me.
This is why Bret Weinstein is careful to say over long periods of time.
It's not what he says in his prediction here, but and he doesn't understand why over long periods of time. He can't explain why. I can.
Okay.
Because memes are symbionts, meaning that their interests will tend to align with their host over long periods of time. This is what we see with parasites. If a parasite is infecting a single host for multiple generations, it will evolve towards a benign interaction with that host.
Correct.
That's why I was saying that HIV has done this with chimps. Chimps are no longer bothered by HIV. They just carry it. It doesn't hurt them.
Well, that's a bit terrifying.
HIV is new to humans, and so it hasn't yet evolved that relationship with us. So there actually are some people that have HIV and are not treated for it and don't have effects. So we know that it is possible, and it seems to be happening. It's probably too early to tell right now, but we have all kinds of diseases. You and I we're not murdered by the flu because the flu knows how to interact with our genes in a way that won't kill us. But that same flu, if you give that to Aborigines and
you're piling on biological explanations that I don't think are helpful, just because they don't address the meme.
No, it is helpful. You're not understanding. A meme is exactly the same. It is an independent evolving entity.
You cannot say that it is exactly the same for the physical aspect of it.
That's the only difference. It doesn't matter.
Genes but it does matter, because you're saying it is exactly the same. It's not irrelevant.
Do you think that if we have evolving computer programs in computers that actually evolve through descent with modification and can compete with each other for hard drive space, do you think that they don't really evolve?
They do evolve, yes.
So why do you think that memes don't really evolve?
I believe they do evolve, but I think the selection pressure is what is always the gene.
It's always the gene.
Yes,
so the selection pressure.
So there
the
can
selection
be,
pressure between two computer programs is always the computer.
It's the goal of the programmer.
No. Okay, I'm talking about the future of AI, where AIs battle each other, and we have no clue what they're doing.
Well, I said this. I said this in the beginning. Until that point, memes are not in direct competition with genes for resources. At that point, we're having a conversation. Seriously,
okay.
if there is a computer program that it's created its own robot body and is competing with human beings for resources, and we have no idea what its goals are, it would probably know what our goals are.
Okay, you're stuck on something so simple. I don't know why.
But even then, we brought it into the physical world. We are physically competing for resources. As long as it's in the computer,
stop.
Competing for hard drive space, we don't care.
Dude, you need to stop and think about this. Please stop. Look, could computer programs compete with each other? Don't worry about them competing with humans. Can they compete with each other for space on a hard drive?
Yes.
Can they or can they not?
Yes.
And can they or can they not evolve to dominate space on a hard drive?
Yes.
Okay. So they can legitimately evolve and compete with each other.
Yes.
They would not be competing with humans at that point.
No.
They'd be competing with each other.
Correct.
Okay. Now, could that find its way onto the internet and start uploading onto computers all over the place?
Sure.
Even though it depends on computers that humans built for its survival. Now it's hurting humans because they can't use their computers.
Right.
Right. But it can still spread, right? Even though now it's gone from competing with other memes, now it's competing with humans for use of the computer. Humans want to use the computer, the meme wants to use, or the program wants to use the computer.
Right.
Now there's competition, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a meme, do you think that memes can compete with each other for space inside human minds?
I don't think I think it comes back to the car design thing. I don't think it's a helpful way to imagine that they're competing between each other. They're competing as tools for us to compete in survival and reproduction.
Why is it that you understand that programs can compete with each other, but you don't think that memes can compete with each other?
Well, it's just the only difference is the way that you're conceptualizing it.
Why?
I am making the argument that entities have to be on the same physical plane to compete with one another. They have to be in some zero-sum contest. Genes and viruses are in a zero-sum contest. Memes and genes are not in a zero-sum contest.
Okay, you just understood that computer programs, which exist only inside of computers,
they are in a zero-sum contest with each other for hard drive space.
Right, and then you also understood that because humans want to use computers and memes both want to use computers, because computer viruses want to use computers and because humans want to use computers, computer viruses and humans can end up competing for the use of the computer, right?
The problem I have with these examples is they seem just designed to prove your way of looking at it, but I don't honestly think they're helpful. I don't think that they can make predictions in the world.
I made 2 predictions in my video.
Okay, what were your predictions?
The first prediction was that I have to remember what those are. To pull up my other slide. I don't want to say them wrong. Let's see.
I mean, I don't want you to think that I can't see it your way. I can. I just don't see the advantage to seeing it your way.
Well, it's true, and what Bret's saying is false. That's the advantage. Now, whether or not being right is going to prove to be profitable or something. I don't know. Let's see. Are you seeing my religion? Okay. Gotta go through here. Wait, predictions? No. This is a fun presentation. Okay. Okay, so this is my hypothesis. If memes depend on passing from parent to child, they will evolve strong cooperation with their hosts. And then my prediction is that memes that spread mainly via proselytizing will often act like viruses. And by that I mean they will be they can be parasitic on their hosts. Memes that spread mainly from parent to child will evolve to act like adaptations. They will evolve mutualism. This is the prediction that I make. So when an idea depends on being passed from parent to child, because otherwise it just doesn't work, it will end up being adaptive over time. It will be forced by natural selection to cooperate. The reason for that is that if an idea can only spread by passing from parent to child, and it better help that child grow up and have lots of kids. Otherwise, it's screwed.
How would you go about proving this prediction?
By studying systems that spread via proselytizing strictly, and systems that spread via parent-child exclusively. Mormonism kind of looks like it spreads via proselytizing, but it turns out that only 1% of the Mormon missionaries are converts. The rest of them are all raised as Mormons. So Mormonism is an example of a religion that is dependent on being passed from parent to child. It's extremely hard to convert someone that doesn't already hold all of the memes or most of the memes of Mormonism. Extremely difficult. As a Mormon missionary, the only people that I was able to convert, I was a Mormon missionary for 2 years before I left Mormonism. I converted 21 people. All of them were already Catholic or Baptist. And so they already had almost all of the crazy memes that I was teaching them as a Mormon. Mormonism was just a reshuffle of those memes. I never was able to convert an atheist because there's too many memes that they had to accept. They had to accept the meme of God. They had to accept the meme of hell, and so on and so forth. So it was just, I couldn't do it. Mormonism has to be spread from parent to child, or through proselytizing, it can only be spread to someone that already believes almost all the bullshit that's already in Mormonism. It's so fake that any adult is like, yeah, you guys are lying. That's not true. So it is a mimetic system that depends on being passed from parent to child. That's why modern Mormonism tends to be beneficial to its hosts. It is a symbiont that has evolved a mutualistic relationship. This is not true of Mormonism in the early days. In the early days of Mormonism, it was only spread through preaching. And what happened is you'd get some flashy looking missionaries teaching this to people, and they'd become converted, and they would come to America. We had the most success. Mormons had the most success getting people in England to come to America. Once they were in America.
I understand the concept that you're putting forward here. How is this any different than the adoption of the iPhone, say?
Well, that's a meme too.
Yes, but people are adopting the iPhone because it serves the genes better.
No, it doesn't. It's a weird statement to make. An iPhone serves the genes. An iPhone serves genes better than a Google phone. Is that what you're saying?
Well, any smartphone. I mean, obviously, there's like the wide. I'm making the analogy that a good idea spreads because it helps people in some tangible way.
Yeah.
Like, well, how is the spreading of Mormonism any different? Because hypothetically, Mormonism helps people in a tangible way, and that's why it spreads.
Early on, Mormon was a trap.
Well, by your subjective opinion, though, like by evolution, you're saying it not necessarily.
No. Early evolution was a trap for a lot of people, especially a lot of men. So they would be converted in England, they would come to America on a ship, spend all their money coming
all
to
I
America.
care about is number of grandsons. I don't care about the moralistic argument that you're making here. All I care about is number of grandsons.
Oh, it doesn't. No. A lot of those people died. They got totally screwed.
Okay.
Not only that, Joseph Smith would steal their wives.
But we don't have the math on this, correct? You don't have the
these people were
evidence.
raising kids that weren't theirs. They thought they were theirs.
You're making a moral argument. All I care is the number of grandsons.
I'm not making a moral argument. These people died. I can show you the numbers. People died on the Pioneer Trail. It was very parasitic. The early Mormon church was extremely exploitive of its members, extremely parasitic. They died. They gave up their sexual fitness. They lost. A couple of people won. And as Mormonism developed, especially once Joseph Smith got killed. Joseph Smith,
let's not go into the history of Mormonism here. I don't think it helps our meme argument. So let's this seems like a good.
You asked me how do I prove this prediction. I'm answering your question.
Right. But you're
proof.
throwing.
I feel like you are ideologically against this, and you don't want me to even show you the proof. Like you're reluctant to even want to learn about this.
I don't have any tangible way to quantify that proof. Like you're just throwing out stuff. I just don't think it's helpful. I mean, I respect the fact that you've got these ideas at the ready, but my problem is I don't know necessarily how to mathematically quantify it. You're saying that Mormonism developed the Mormons had less reproductive fitness than other religions. Obviously not. It didn't drive them to extinction. Otherwise we wouldn't have Mormonism. So yes, there may have been a costly aspect to it as it got going, but as it got going, they refined it, evolution refined it as.
Yeah. The parasite that is Mormonism evolved towards a mutualistic relationship with its host, which is the people who are You're
calling it a parasite. I can conceptualize it as a mutation, as a mutant gene inside a human being.
It's not a gene. There is no gene that codes for Mormonism. I don't know why you can't see this. People are converted to Mormonism from Catholicism, from whatever other religion. There is no gene. There is no Mormon gene. It does not exist.
I'm not saying that there is a Mormon gene. What
are you saying?
Well, there are obviously genes that are involved in the process somewhere.
There are genes that code for brains, and the brain is now an environment where memes can evolve within.
But a brain is looking for valuable ideas that aid in its survival and reproduction.
Yeah, but it's not smart enough to really know.
Okay, I agree with you, but the evolutionary process winnows those ideas down through survival and reproduction.
No, the evolutionary process tames parasites and turns them into beneficial symbionts.
Okay, or weeds out mutations.
It's not really weeding out a mutation because it's weeding out bad memes. So
let's finish. We're approaching the 2-hour mark here now, and I know you.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to agree on this. I kind of stated that in the beginning.
Yeah. So,
do you want to put your camera back on? So,
let's do. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
There we go.
So let me just summarize this. I'm going to do a lesson on this tomorrow too, because I think that Bret needs to understand this, and he's not going to watch a 2-hour video. This is already like 2.5 hours. So Bret has a model, and I read his paper, this paper that you sent me, and he has a model that seems like it might work, but he completely ignores the significance of memes in that model. And memes are actually showing a similar phenomena to what he's predicting with his model, but they do it better because they can show why it doesn't work sometimes. Why is it that sometimes a really addictive idea will just kill everybody? And this has happened multiple times throughout history. There's lots of cults that have ended in mass genocides. There's all sorts of ideas that catch on really good, but they're bad. The idea that you can have a companion dog is not a new idea. People have had companion dogs for like hundreds of years. And the companion dog is a replacement for the companion that you might get from a family member, but it does not, when people use it that way, it hurts their fitness. But it's such an addictive idea because if you're stressed out in a bad relationship and you have a friend who's just with his dog and he's getting all this emotional support from that instead of a relationship, that meme spreads into your idea. Like, I don't need a partner. I can just hang out with a dog. And you know,
okay. I mean, we're just conceptualizing these two different ways, but
this is an addictive idea that hurts your fitness, your reproductive fitness, but continues to spread. And there's lots of them that do that. So
okay.
my list of all these things that prove Bret's prediction wrong. This is what he needs to understand. His prediction is wrong. Therefore, something with his theory is messed up. And he needs to understand that.
We can definitely do this again. We can do it on another topic. This has been a lot of fun, and I can't wait to see what the reaction is. So hopefully, I mean, when we originally started talking, you had said, you would watch some of my videos, and I'm not making the standard arguments that a lot of atheists are making on the internet. So, which I consider to be a compliment. Yeah. I want this conversation. This is an interesting conversation. It's much more interesting than arguing over the standard arguments most of these people are debating. So obviously, to be continued. The science moves forward. These ideas are debated. Ultimately, the evidence is the final arbiter of who's right and what's a better model. So
yeah, the evidence proves that Bret's wrong.
Okay.
It doesn't prove that I'm right, but it proves that Bret's definitely wrong. There's no doubt about it. His prediction is completely false. Maybe he did a bad prediction because he was on the spot and he wasn't reading it. It's not. Maybe that's what his problem was, and that's why I'd like to have him on my show to talk about why exactly he thinks that lineage selection is a better model than cultural evolution. Because I think cultural evolution is a much better way to think about why seeing culture as an independent evolving entity is a much better thing to look at. Culture as a symbiont with a host, and the host is us. That's a way better way to think about these adaptations than thinking that there's genes that are coding for these things. There is no Mormon gene. There is no money gene. That doesn't exist.
Okay. Well, let's leave it there. Thank you. You've been very, very generous with your time, and I will make some minor audio edits, and I'll upload this today.
Sorry if I'm getting overly excited here, but
it's okay.
This topic.
Let's. Do you have any final anything you want to say? I don't want to cut you off if you want to make a final point.
My screen's can you even? Am I moving to you?
Yes.
Okay, my screen is frozen for some reason. This software froze my screen, but I do have this list of mimetic parasites, and because Bret seems to be a group selectionist, even though he says he's not, I've also got a list of parasites that are parasitic, of memes that are parasitic to every group you could possibly imagine. Memes that are parasitic to a religion, memes that are parasitic to a nation, memes that are parasitic to a political party, memes that are parasitic to a family. And if he would like those lists, I can give them to him. there's lots of really popular memes that spread like crazy and are completely destructive for us as a species, and for us as individuals, and for us as groups. So I'm happy to share that with them.
Okay.
And what I'm saying this is evidence of is that memes are symbionts, which can be parasitic, can be commensalistic, can be mutualistic. And the longer a set of memes is evolving with a group of people, the more likely it is to evolve towards a mutualistic relationship. And that's the model we should be looking at.
Well, let's leave it there.
All right.
Take care. Thanks so much, everybody. Let us know in the comments below what you think, and let us know what side of the debate you're on. This is an interesting discussion, and it's fascinating stuff. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, first of all, if you don't have a purpose, it isn't that your life becomes neutral in a meaningless sense. It's that your life becomes characterized by unbearable suffering. Because the baseline condition of life is something like unbearable suffering.